You must understand this. Women do not need you to be their psychologist. They do not fall for the most handsome man, the smartest, or even the most attentive. They bond with the man who can disrupt their emotional balance without asking for permission. Attachment does not come from affection. It comes from impact, from the way a man silently alters a woman's mental map without saying a single word. And the fascinating thing is, he does not need grand gestures to do it. In fact, grand gestures often fail because they smell like effort. True attachment is born from tiny microscopic actions that her brain records as biological signals of deep connection. When a woman becomes attached, it is not a conscious choice. She does not think, "I'm going to get emotionally involved with this man." Her Lycor system simply detects a specific pattern of behavior that tells her, "This man understands me. This man sees me. This man represents something different." That pattern has nothing to do with words, compliments, or romantic speeches. It is driven by 6 invisible actions that, without her realizing it, activate the same neural circuits that control emotional attachment, desire, and emotional dependence. Let us begin with the first one. Break her predictability without breaking her security. A woman becomes attached when a man gives her certainty and mystery in perfect balance. Too predictable, and her emotions fall asleep. Too chaotic, and her defenses come alive. But in the narrow space between both, something extraordinary happens. That's where deep mental attraction is born. An ordinary man always falls into one of 2 traps. Either he becomes routine and transparent, or he tries so hard to be unpredictable that he starts to look unstable. The man who truly creates attachment understands one thing most men never grasp. A woman's attention is not conquered. It is interrupted. That interruption is not about chaos. It is about disrupting her emotional rhythm just enough that her mind begins to lean toward you. It happens when she cannot fully predict your next move, not because you are confusing, but because you act according to your own logic, not hers. You do not respond to please her. You respond because that is what feels right to you. You do not speak to gain approval. You speak to express clarity. And that subtle difference shatters the illusion of control she thought she had. Because every woman, consciously or not, seeks to understand the man she desires. The moment she cannot fully read you, her mind begins to chase you. Her brain enters a loop of analysis, decoding your tone, replaying your silences, wondering what you truly think. That process quietly releases dopamine, the same chemical that fuels addiction. Her attention becomes hooked on your unpredictability. She begins to anticipate, to analyze, to feel, and that emotion, that tension becomes the foundation of attachment. But here is the paradox. You must create this emotional disruption without ever breaking her sense of safety. That is the fine art that separates the powerful from the ordinary. She must feel that you are solid, that you move from conviction, not from confusion. Your energy must communicate. "I am grounded in my world. I do not need your validation, but I could surprise you at any moment." That tension keeps her connected, not because she physically desires you, but because her mind needs to close the unfinished loop you've created. When your behavior is consistent with your values, but unpredictable in expression, you become the stimulus she cannot categorize, and the female brain craves what it cannot define. It is drawn to the man who brings both stability and suspense, a paradox her biology cannot resist, because predictability breeds safety, but unpredictability creates emotion, and emotion is what her psyche ultimately worships. So understand this. You are not playing games. You are creating gravity. You are not withholding affection. You are controlling rhythm. You are not being distant. You are being sovereign. She will keep returning to you, not because you are always there, but because your absence feels like a question she needs to answer. And when you master that, when your presence both grounds and unsettles her, you are no longer part of her routine. You become part of her mental landscape. That is where true attachment begins, not from the man who chases, but from the man whose silence speaks in her thoughts. Now that you understand the first principle, breaking her predictability without breaking her security, prepare for the second. Because the next one does not just reach her mind, it enters her body, and once you understand that level of connection, there's no turning back. 2. Create sensory experiences that her mind cannot forget. Attachment does not come from what you say. It comes from what you make her feel without speaking at all. Words fade, gifts lose their novelty, even physical touch becomes routine. But what never fades is how her body reacted when you were present. Because the female body doesn't remember logic, it remembers sensation. It remembers the tone of your voice, low, calm, measured. It remembers the way your movements never rush, each one deliberate, grounded, precise. It remembers your silence, not the silence of emptiness, but of control. When you look at her, hold eye contact without urgency or discomfort. Her nervous system registers something ancient. This man is safe but powerful, and that's the moment her body begins to memorize you. The female body stores emotional memory through physical sensations, not through what is said, but through what is felt. Every time you maintain that composed rhythm, you are reprogramming her physiological response toward you. Most men overcompensate. They talk too much. They move too quickly. They chase validation through volume. But the man who creates attachment knows the secret. He doesn't seduce. He creates atmospheres. He knows that emotion is spatial, not verbal. That attraction is born, not in the words exchanged, but in the energy that fills the silence between them. He walks into a room, and his presence shifts the air. Not because he's trying to dominate, but because his energy is anchored, rooted, heavy, deliberate. His calmness becomes contagious. His silence becomes magnetic. His stillness feels like power restrained. When he speaks, he doesn't rush to fill space. He lets the silence before and after his words amplify the weight of what he says. And without realizing it, she begins to feel different when he is near. Her breathing slows, then deepens. Her thoughts fade into focus. Her body enters a state of alert fascination, that subtle blend of safety and anticipation. It's not lust, it's not comfort, it's emotional gravity. Her subconscious begins to record these sensations, your tone, your stillness, your rhythm, and every time you reappear, her body reactivates those same emotional signals. That is where the unconscious anchor is born. Her body learns to feel more when you are near and less when you are gone. That contrast becomes emotional withdrawal. That withdrawal becomes need, and need is the root of attachment. Understand this. You are not trying to please her. You are training her nervous system to recognize your presence as intensity. You're not giving her comfort. You are giving her contrast. The world feels quieter when you're gone and louder when you return. That difference, that rise and fall in emotion becomes her internal proof that you matter. A man who masters this doesn't chase emotions, he engineers them. He knows that the human mind does not fall in love with people. It falls in love with states, and he becomes the state she cannot recreate without him. When your presence becomes her stimulus for depth, calm, and excitement at once, you stop being a man in her life. You become the experience her body keeps seeking again and again. And once a woman's body remembers you, her mind will find every reason to follow. Now that you understand how emotion is built through sensation, prepare for the next step, because the third action is not about presence, it's about absence. And what happens when your silence becomes the loudest sound in her mind? 3. Master the art of intermittence. Nothing creates deeper attachment than intermittence. Not constant attention, not total absence, but the rhythm of appearing and retreating with perfect precision. In behavioral psychology, this is called variable reinforcement, the same principle that makes people addicted to social media, to gambling, to the chase itself. You never know when the reward will come, but when it does, it's enough to keep you waiting for the next one. Women experience the exact same neurological mechanism, but through emotional signals, not screens or machines. When a man is always available, her brain stops producing dopamine, the molecule of desire. When he is completely absent, her mind deletes him as an emotional risk. But when he appears unpredictably and intensely, Her limbic system lights up like a warning flare. It enters emotional alert. Curiosity awakens. Anticipation floods her veins. Understand this. Intermittence is not about disappearing. It's not about manipulation. It's about breaking her emotional routine. Most men become predictable too quickly. Their attention follows a fixed pattern. Their messages always timed. Their tone always seeking comfort instead of disruption. They mistake consistency for value, not realizing that predictability kills emotional voltage. But the man who understands this law builds his presence like a heartbeat, steady enough to be felt, rare enough to be missed. His responses are not mechanical, they are organic, aligned with his own time, his priorities, his real desire. His energy follows the pulse of his life, not the tempo of her expectations. And that is what makes his presence irresistibly rare. The natural intermittence of a man centered on himself, not cold, not careless, but devoted to his purpose, is profoundly addictive. She doesn't know when you'll reach out again, but when you do, her entire body reacts. That rush, that emotional spark after distance, reinforces the neural bond between you. It's the same surge her brain releases after craving something forbidden. She starts associating your name, your voice, your silence with the same biochemical pattern as reward. And once her body learns that rhythm of absence followed by intensity, you stop being an option. You become the stimulus her system depends on. Think about it. Her brain begins to anticipate you, like a game she can't stop playing. It waits for the next message, the next eye contact, the next unpredictable moment of connection. And every time you appear, the dopamine spikes, a small, powerful reward that makes her crave you even more. This is why intermittent presence is stronger than constant attention. Constancy gives comfort. Intermittence gives addiction. But remember, this only works when it's authentic. It cannot be performed, timed, or acted out. It has to be born from your own grounded rhythm. The man who is busy living doesn't need to plan his distance. His silence is a natural consequence of his focus. That's what keeps her chasing, because she can feel the difference between manipulation and momentum. The first drains her trust. The second ignites her curiosity. A man anchored in his mission doesn't have to vanish to create mystery. His life already makes him mysterious. His purpose already creates scarcity. And scarcity is what gives his attention value. When you master this art, she never knows when the next moment will come. Only that when it does, it will matter. Your unpredictability becomes her rhythm. Your silence becomes her suspense. And your reappearance becomes her reward. That's how a man stops being an option and becomes a biological trigger. Something her body unconsciously waits for, even when her mind tells her not to. Now you see the power of controlled presence, but the next step goes even deeper. Because what truly binds a woman to you is not your mystery or your timing. It's how safe she feels when her soul is exposed. And that's what the next action reveals. How to make her open up emotionally without ever losing your center. 4. Make her express herself without feeling judged. One of the most powerful experiences a man can ever offer a woman is emotional freedom, not through words like "I understand you," but through presence. The man who creates attachment doesn't rush to fix. He doesn't argue, interrupt, or offer premature comfort. He simply listens with a level of attention so steady, so unshakable, that her emotional armor begins to soften on its own. His gaze doesn't seek approval. It doesn't try to correct her. It simply holds her. That kind of attention disarms every defense mechanism she spent years building, because most women, even the strong ones, especially the strong ones, live in a constant state of self-protection. They've learned that vulnerability has a price, that being open often leads to judgment, distance, or rejection. So when she meets a man who doesn't judge, doesn't analyze, but observes her calmly without losing his center, something shifts in the deepest layers of her psyche. Her nervous system recognizes with him, "I am safe." Her mind records with him, "I can feel without consequence." And that registration, that small invisible moment, is the birth of emotional attachment. You must understand, in the female mind, emotional safety equals relational value. She doesn't bond with the man who solves her problems. She bonds with the man who can hold her storms without being pulled in by them. That is the quiet power of presence, not the presence that fills space, but the presence that allows space to exist. Because when you don't flinch at her emotion, when you remain grounded as she exposes what she hides from the world, you become her emotional mirror. The one place where she sees herself completely and still feels accepted. And that is unforgettable. She will replay that feeling long after you're gone. The memory of being seen without judgment, heard without interruption, and understood without explanation. That experience marks you inside her subconscious as a reference point, an emotional home. Not a person, not a role, a state. The state where she could finally say, even silently, "I can be myself without feeling weak." And that phrase, though she'll never voice it, binds her far more tightly than desire ever could. Because desire fades when it's satisfied, but emotional freedom that becomes addiction. She may try to walk away, but part of her will keep orbiting back to the one man who made her feel safe enough to be real. Every man tries to be exciting. Few ever learn to be safe. And safety in the female psyche is the deepest seduction there is. You don't earn it with charm. You command it through calm. You create it through emotional control, the ability to stay unshaken while she unravels. That's why she bonds with the man who listens differently. Not to respond, but to witness. Because being witnessed without judgment is the rarest form of intimacy she'll ever experience. And the moment she associates that feeling with you, she won't crave constant attention. She'll crave your presence, the stillness that makes her feel seen, not the noise that makes her feel noticed. When you reach that point, you no longer compete for her mind. You live inside it. And now that you understand how silence and safety can bind her emotions, prepare for the next action, because what comes next goes even deeper. The fifth action will teach you how to show interest without dependency. So your presence becomes a reward, not a request. 5. Show interest without dependence. The most common mistake men make when seeking connection is confusing interest with dependence. Interest ignites attraction. Dependence kills it. A woman doesn't attach to the man who worships her. She attaches to the man who sees her clearly, but doesn't need her. She feels it the moment your energy speaks. My life is already whole, but I still choose to share it with you. That's what creates emotional privilege, not obligation. Your attention stops feeling like an act of pursuit and starts feeling like a gift, something deliberate, earned and scarce, and everything scarce becomes valuable. Most men chase, they flood her with attention, text her too fast, rearrange their lives to be available. They confuse constant presence with connection, not realizing that availability without boundaries is emotional poverty. But the man who creates attachment understands the opposite truth. He doesn't chase, he selects. He doesn't react to every signal. He chooses which one deserves his energy. His calm restraint becomes magnetic because it speaks one unspoken truth. I could, but I don't need to. And that quiet control is intoxicating. When she senses that you could have anyone, but you remain present by decision, not by dependence, her entire system destabilizes. Her logic says, he's independent, but her emotions whisper, then why me? That internal contradiction keeps her chasing the answer. Her mind begins to circle around you, trying to decode what makes her different. That analysis releases dopamine, the chemistry of curiosity and desire, and just like that, her brain begins to associate you with the same thrill that comes from a mystery it can't solve. You are not feeding her ego, you are feeding her wonder. Understand this. When your life is full, your mission alive, your energy disciplined, you stop seeking emotional nourishment from her. You become nourishment to her. Because women do not crave attention, they crave the validation of being chosen by a man who doesn't need to choose anyone. You don't need to prove your worth. Your composure already does it for you. You don't need to make her feel special. She'll feel special just by being in the presence of a man who does not revolve around her gravity, but stands firm in his own. That exact combination, desire without dependence, affection without attachment, choice without need, awakens her deepest instinct for bonding. Because biologically a woman does not want to mother you, she wants to admire you. And admiration only exists where self-sufficiency lives. So when she sees that your peace remains intact, even when she pulls away, that your focus doesn't shatter when she withdraws her attention, that your validation comes from purpose, not approval, you stop being a man who desires her and become a man her mind cannot forget. Your restraint becomes the new standard, your calmness becomes the new craving, and your attention, when finally given, feels like a reward, not a routine. You see, the paradox is this: when you no longer need her affection, she starts to fight for it. When you no longer chase her validation, she begins to seek yours, because in her subconscious, value is measured by what you can walk away from. Show interest, yes, be warm, be human, be real, but never be dependent. Never let your presence lose its rarity, because the moment your attention becomes predictable, your power disappears. A man who needs nothing commands everything, and that is the secret behind true emotional dominance. Not control over her, but control over yourself. Now you're beginning to see the full architecture of attachment, how mystery, sensation, freedom, and restraint intertwine. But there's one final layer, because the strongest bond isn't created while you're present. It's what happens after you leave, and that's exactly what the final action reveals. How to leave a mark on her mind, even in your absence. 6. Leave a trace in her mind when you are gone. This final principle is the most subtle, but also the most powerful. It's not about what you say, or even what you do. It's about what remains after you've done nothing at all. Your true power begins when your silence speaks louder than anyone else's presence. Make her think of you when you are not even trying, when you're occupied with your own life, your purpose, your stillness. This isn't manipulation, it's psychological resonance, the invisible echo you leave in her nervous system. You achieve it not through grand gestures, but through details so distinct that her mind can't find their equal in anyone else. The way you look at her, not with hunger but with depth. The exact pause before your touch. The tone in which you say her name when you want to calm her, not soft but grounded. These small, almost invisible actions become micro-emotional codes engraved in her subconscious. And then when she goes back to her life, the crowded office, the noise, the endless messages, something simple triggers it. A scent, a tone, a phrase, a silence. Her body reacts before her mind remembers. Your image flashes, your voice returns, and for a split second she feels you again. That is how attachment is sealed, not by your presence, but by the way her biology keeps summoning you in your absence. Understand this. Her body stores emotion more faithfully than her memory ever could. When she feels both intensity and safety in your presence, her nervous system fuses those two opposites together and attaches your name to the feeling. You stop being a man. You become a stimulus, a pattern, a chemical signature she can't recreate anywhere else. And that is why she comes back. Not out of loyalty, not out of logic, but because her own body betrays her mind. Attachment doesn't form through control or through dominance. It forms when a woman feels something she can't fully understand, but can't live without repeating. A mixture of calm and chaos, security and mystery, logic and instinct. Only a man who has mastered his emotional center can create that. Because you cannot leave peace in her if you live in turmoil yourself. You cannot awaken curiosity if you live in imitation. You cannot become unforgettable if you keep chasing to be remembered. Real influence is silent. It doesn't demand attention. It invents it. That's why the most Machiavellian form of power is not control over her behavior, but influence over her nervous system. You alter her without possessing her. You provoke her without pleading. You become an experience, not a person. When you achieve this, you no longer have to insist. She returns on her own. Not because of what you do, but because her biology has already chosen you. She will scroll through names, see faces, hear voices, but nothing will hit the same frequency. You became the emotional pattern her mind cannot replace. That is the Machiavellian essence of attachment. To alter without owning, to seduce without speaking, to dominate without touching, and only the men who master this subtle art understand what most will never grasp. That true emotional power doesn't come from being her focus. It comes from being the most pleasurable disruption in her mind. You are not her comfort, you are her imbalance, the one she secretly craves, the silence that hums louder than words, the storm that leaves her wanting the rain again. When you reach that level, you've crossed from attraction to addiction. Not because you manipulated her, but because you became the rarest experience her psyche has ever tasted. A man who didn't chase, didn't beg, didn't fold, but still lives inside her mind. Rentry, you've just walked through the hidden corridors of the female psyche, the 6 invisible actions that bind a woman, not through promises, but through psychological gravity. You've seen what most men never see, that the game was never about being perfect, charming, or rich. It was about being unforgettable. Now you understand the law. What she cannot predict, she cannot control. What she cannot explain, she cannot forget. And what she cannot replace, she will forever chase. Break her predictability, and she'll feel curiosity. Awaken her senses, and she'll feel your presence even in silence. Master intermittence, and her mind will orbit around you, seeking rhythm in your absence. Offer emotional safety, and her soul will rest only in your stillness. Show interest without dependence, and your restraint will haunt her like desire disguised as discipline. Leave a trace when you're gone, and your ghost will live longer in her nervous system than most men live in her life. Because the truth Machiavelli understood was simple. Power is not what you take, it's what others give you voluntarily, when they can no longer tell the difference between your presence and their own need. That is the essence of the Machiavellian man. He doesn't beg to be desired. He becomes the stimulus that desire obeys. He doesn't pursue emotions, he engineers them. He doesn't conquer women. He conquers the reaction they can't control. And once you've seen the architecture behind attachment, you cannot unsee it. Every glance, every silence, every delay, you'll read it for what it truly is, a test of center. She doesn't want your chaos. She wants to feel her own chaos reflected in your calm. She wants to lose herself, but only in a man who never loses himself first. That's why Machiavelli said the wise man acts according to the times, but the master brother, the master creates the times. You are no longer reacting to attraction, you are designing it. You are no longer seeking validation, you are redefining value. And as you step into this new state, a man whose presence alters, whose silence seduces, whose absence burns, remember this: the weak man seeks attention. The strong man commands it, but the awakened man becomes it. And when you reach that level, you no longer chase love, approval, or validation. You become the gravity around which they orbit. So stay centered, stay dangerous, and above all, stay unforgettable, because this is not the end of the game. This is the game, and now you know how to play it. If this opened your eyes, then you are not the same man who pressed play. You've seen the truth that most will never dare to face, that power in love does not belong to the loud, but to the silent, to the man whose presence rewires the air around him. She will feel it, the shift in your energy, the calm that unnerves her, the confidence that doesn't need to prove itself. You've stopped being predictable, you've stopped being ordinary, and now you've become gravitational, because attraction isn't built with words, it's carved in silence, it's written in restraint,